Masterminds have been around for a long time, right? But unless you had a bunch of extra income to throw at it, you couldn't be a part of it. Well, we wanted to solve that problem. And so we're bringing masterminds to you for free. Welcome to Mastermind for the Masses.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Mastermind for the Masses. We've got Colby and myself here hosting today, and Shan's here, but today he is actually going to be our guest. We're going to deep dive into some of Shan's background. But before we do that, like every week, want to kind of kick off with what's been going on this week. So Shan, we'll give you the honors to go first.
Yeah. I got back from Baltimore on Sunday. So I just been kind of relaxing since I'm getting a couple things done. I move in a month, so I'm trying to like plan all that out, try to figure out how I'm gonna like transition because I work from home too, so that's always an interesting piece to that. But other than that, nothing much. Been quiet.
Awesome. How about you, Colby?
Nothing too new or interesting. Same old, same old. Still playing hockey, still studying programming on the side. I was telling Shan actually before the podcast that I actually have a new fun project at work where I'm going to be actually like creating our own internal website that we're going to host internally and use it for like our internal documentation. And who knows, maybe it'll have some interesting use cases for other items down the road. But at least it'd be like a fun little project to really dive into. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty cool. As far as me, this last weekend got to kind of actually get out on the water, which was nice. I actually texted Shan because I thought he might be around, and then he reminded me he was out of town. So I was like, well, I guess that won't see each other there. But I was rocking my All at Bay shirt for you, Shan. So I was representing out there, and then came home and built a fire pit. So a little productive weekend, I guess.
Yeah,
But it's about the highlights.
Very
yeah.
nice.
That's a
What were you
that's a
saying?
weird time to put a fire pit. When it's like 90 degrees in Florida, but
Yeah.
100%.
It's like the worst time.
you're gonna be happy when
Yeah.
winter comes.
Yeah, we weren't lighting a fire, but I wanted to be prepared for when the fire comes. I didn't want to have to build one in December, for that one day that it might come in handy. But it's more of an aesthetic thing than anything, let's be honest. But it we got it done, so I count it as a
Nice.
win. But Shan, we're putting you on the spot. Obviously, last week we got to dive in with Colby and get a little background on him. So this week we're turning the spotlight on you, as I know you love. So I think probably makes sense to me to kind of kick things off similar how we did Colby. Maybe give us a little bit of background, man, and get us up to modern day before we dive into some more specific questions. Just curious how
Yeah.
you got from point A to point Z, right?
Yeah, and it may
Yep.
be helpful too, Shan. I don't know if this is to help you get started, but because like the first question I had is more interested in like sort of general stuff, but I was kind of curious, like especially since you're like really big into being an entrepreneur and everything like that, and I was kind of curious, like at what point you decided you even wanted to do stuff like that, and if it's been something you've kind of like had as an interest for a while, or like kind of like what led to the start of all that for you, because it feels like you've been doing it for like quite a while.
Yeah. Honestly, I when I like sit back and reflect on the entrepreneurial side of things, I don't ever look at it like in a sense of someone who kind of grew up wanting to be an entrepreneur. It was actually like quite the opposite. Like I was pretty laid out and focused, like just locked in on building a career, and I've always still kind of been that way. So kind of just to answer both of your questions, Josh, I literally since middle school, I've been a huge IT nerd and someone who's been like highly focused on like electronics and like networking and pretty much everything I'm still focused on today, but in a broader scope. So I grew up with a pretty normal childhood. Grew up here in Florida. I live like 20 minutes away uh, from my hometown and the house I grew up in. So like my environment hasn't changed too much. When I went to college in Tampa, moved away for a little bit. Had a son early. I had a son at 20 years old. So I moved back to my home county, bought a house, and started raising my family. Um, so kind of like where that threw a wrench in a lot of my plan has always been to be a software engineer. When I first attended USF, I got accepted in the computer engineering program, and I was literally like just literally a slave to the library at USF. I was there every day, just hyper focused on one thing. I wasn't running a business at the time. I wasn't thinking about business or anything like that. I mean, I think at the time I was like learning to play the guitar, so I had a little bit of uh, like outside interest going on, but not much. I was very very locked in. Um, so that was
Is that
around
when you were
it was like
buying all the guitars?
that's actually when it started, right, for sure. I was way broker though, so honestly, there were like pawn shop guitars at the time, and it was a lot less often.
Gotcha.
But it was yeah.
Gotcha.
So locked in, like I said, locked in at USF. Knew I wanted to focus my career on computer engineering, and then at the same time, I made an accident, had a kid. I got probably like I think it was like 6 months into the program before I found out I was going to be having a son, and then just completely redirected and changed my mindset from then on. At that point, it became to hyper focus on being prepared to be a father and being prepared to be a provider, which unfortunately led me to move back home. I still attended USF remotely. I had to drop down to part time. At the time, the engineering program at USF was very strict with the amount of hours you needed on campus. So I did have to drop out of the computer engineering program and switch to IT, um, in which I kind of did that at a much slower pace. That's when suddenly I went from having like literally 12 to 15 hours locked in a day for studying and working on schoolwork to not having it at all, like literally maybe like 4 to 6 hours needed. So I had all this free time, and that's when I started venturing out and trying to figure out how, again, how can I capitalize and uh, monetize my free time, which has always been my mindset. That's what I meant when I was talking to you, Colby, about like my view on the entrepreneurship being different. It's never been about like, hey, I want to jump in and start a business. It's always been like, okay, if I'm going to have free time, how can I make it efficient? And on top of making it efficient, how could, I potentially make it like a source of revenue or a source of like income? So that's
Mm.
kind of like sitting in the back of my mind for a lot of the decisions that I make. But to continue the story, yeah, I moved back home. School was a lot less of a focus for me, which is when I started the beer company, Royer Beersman. And even to backdate that a little bit, that actually branched out from um, an Amazon FBA venture where you basically use Amazon's warehouse to kind of ship and sell the products that you provide. So I started that with one other of my childhood friends. Me and him started that. We branched into building our own brand. I kind of got addicted to the concept of building a brand, like gaining a following, like creating something based off of what you like, and almost making it kind of entertaining at the same time, right? Like I actually enjoy uh, using that part of my creativity to kind of sell something that means something to me.
Mm.
And that's kind of where All at Bay came from. All at Bay was like, all right, I made this work on a beard product that you specifically have to be, I mean, in range of 25 to 40 years old, 40 years plus. You have to be able to grow a beard half the time. You have to be a man, and majority of cases you have to be in the United States. So I kind of tackled a closed audience that really didn't allow me to like spew a huge potential, which is where All at Bay came from for the clothing. Because like, what's the exact opposite of that, right? What's the exact opposite of a product that you have to be a bearded man to have? It's clothing, right? Like everyone wears clothing. Everyone can wear different styles and can switch up with like the different outfits and stuff like that. So I took that approach to things, but to cut that to cut that in an end too, I've always had that mindset. Like even in high school, when I was a big IT nerd, I started a small little business repairing iPhones and iPads, and like getting certifications. Like when I was in high school for being a technician, or I was at least at the time a Dell technician, and then Macintosh technician. I was just really interested in like the repairing side of things because one, like it allowed me to be a nerd at my fullest potential, and two, it kind of gave me that like that introduction to, okay, if you do this on your free time, how do you make money? How do you put that into revenue? And then more importantly, like how do you keep it related to something that doesn't feel like a chore?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that would
yeah,
be my hardest part with that whole thing is just, because I like the idea of like making money in your free time, right? Like an additional source of revenue, and that sounds like super nice to have. But I've always like struggled with the idea of like how do you get it to feel like it's not like having a second job essentially, because like the moment I would feel like that, to me I feel like my motivation to keep doing it would be super low. So I was kind of like do you does it has it like do they start to feel like having like just second and third jobs, or is it actually just kind of like a fun little like almost like side hobby?
no, it's definitely more like a hobby. And I would say that we mirror each other on that same exact thought process. Like whenever I'm starting anything new, that's the first thing that runs through my mind is like, is this going to be more of a chore, or is this going to be something that I'm going to only gain interest in over time, right? Like the
Mm,
clothing brand is a huge avenue for that. I knew at the beginning I could only afford to start carrying clothing, or not clothing, t-shirts, right? But then I knew like that excitement, and then that growth would lead to like hoodies, and then it would lead to like tank tops, and then maybe shorts and bracelets and jewelry and all this stuff that like I can kind of um, I can kind of like tie myself into, while at the
mm,
same time like be super excited and like stoked to build that up, right? Because if you're creating products that also benefit yourself, at the same time they benefit your customers, that's what makes it even more enticing too. I mean, I just bought like a new film printer for a lot of like the t-shirts on like neck tags and stuff like that, so I can customize my own like neck tags, and that leads me to the point where I'm like, man, I want to like do all kinds of like interesting and custom like tags, and or do labeling, and like all these small kind of projects, right? That like if you build that excitement, and you do something that you just enjoy doing, you're passionate about, I feel like it's really the only step you need to start
yeah.
like an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm curious to know if like I'll ever get to that point in my own life where like something like that really becomes like something I'd be interested in doing. And one of the reasons is I've always been like petrified of starting a business of any kind just due to the um like fear of like an initial like upfront investment like into like what you need to do, right? Like if you need to like purchase the materials, right, to make a bunch of clothing, and then you're like it's essentially sitting inventory waiting to sell. Essentially that's like a sunk cost, right? And like for you, like when you got into these things, was that like an initial hurdle that you had to get over, or is it just like what did that even look like? I have such a hard time conceptualizing even just getting started.
No, so honestly, I think in reverse for that. Um,
Mm,
a lot of people think that way. They like imagine that they have to come up with some kind of figure, register for a business, learn about like how to file taxes and all this before they actually get started. Um,
mm,
but for me, every time it's been beginning a hobby or an interest, and taking it and kind of doing some like A/B testing, like for the beard company, right? Like we were formulating products that we didn't go out and buy ingredients in bulk for. We didn't go out and like um, invest a certain amount into creating packaging or a website or anything yet. We started with like what we would mostly be interested in first, and then we had people try it, right? Friends and fam. At the time, I had a giant beard. Like all my buddies had giant beards, so it was super simple for us to get started that way. Same with the clothing brand, right? I didn't register for an LLC for All at Bay until about month 3, when I was actually
Oh
starting
wow.
to spend enough to where it was worth me writing it off under a business. So I kind
Dang.
of think
Okay.
same thing with the website, right? Or same thing with the investment. Um, I never actually like limit myself that way. I usually start with the most interesting portion of that piece, right? Like if I were to start a business in entertainment or like streaming or like podcasts, for example, like I would do a couple podcasts first, or I would stream a couple times first before I started anything. I mean, we're kind of doing it right now. This is
Yeah.
like a peak example of, people turn podcasts into an entire business and source of revenue, right? But if they thought about it in the terms of like, okay, what do I need to invest in equipment and all this first? Chances are they're never even going to start.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. Yeah, so it's more just about like starting whatever project you're interested in doing, and then once it gets to a point where like you can actually do something with it larger, you invest in it like incrementally over time as you need.
Yeah, and I feel like we're all given that advice all the time, right? Like just start, but
Yeah.
until you like force yourself to go through it, you kind of just shrug it off for a little bit. And I know Josh gives that advice a lot too, so he can probably relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, for sure. I'm always a big believer in jumping in, and then figuring it out as you go. But I guess for our listeners, Shan, one of the questions I have is obviously you've become pretty comfortable with this and things like that, but what kind of pitfalls or challenges would you warn people about diving into it, right? Obviously, they just need to get going. But since you do have a lot of experience and background in this, are there any tips or tricks that you could say, okay, you're going, but watch out for this, right? Or keep this in mind, that type of thing. What would you say are some of the biggest
Yeah. So
recommendations for new entrepreneurs?
I think most people study success when they look at like entrepreneurship, like they're influenced by other people's success. But everyone should understand, or at least should try to understand, that that's really romanticized. And in fact, like the people that you're kind of addicting viewing their content, or like these brands that you're addicted to, like thinking about like how they started, stuff like that, chances are the bigger they are and the more impressive they are, the harder they struggle. And that's one thing that took me a while to kind of like grasp. And it really, the difference between like someone who's able to build a brand and someone who's not is someone who's able to fail like repetitively, especially when it comes to building a brand. I think it's a very rare case where things work out the first time around. I mean, it was miserable for the beard company. Like our product kind of was all over the place at the beginning. Our logo was just trash at the beginning. Like all this, we took the feedback from, and we decided to take it as like an opportunity to enhance it instead of just giving up. But a lot of people, unfortunately, it's something you just got to throw your ego away and just accept to it. I've actually had a buddy before who started a really, really cool business and brand. And unfortunately, that the feedback got a little bit ahead of him, and he decided to not continue it, which was, that's his own decision. And the way his thought process works, it was probably the healthier decision for him. But I see that a lot. I see people who think that just because something didn't work at the beginning, it should be given up on. But the pitfall to that, Josh, too, is you should also like measure out when enough might be enough. When like an idea might be taking 90% of your energy, and your commitment, and it's just not going in the direction you want. You have to also be able to put your ego aside and know when, maybe it's not the right venture, or maybe like closing the doors here allows you to open the door on something else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I think before we dive too far down this rabbit hole, we've talked a lot about your businesses, Royal Beardsman and All at Bay, but I think you should kind of clue people in if maybe they aren't aware of it. Obviously, we've got a beard line and we've got a clothing line, but tell us a little bit about Royal Beardsman.
Yeah, absolutely. So Royal Beardsman was started 2018. It's an e-commerce brand that focuses on mostly men's grooming products, but we've expanded out to general skincare too. But back in 2018, there was a huge opportunity and more of an educational movement on like the care for your beard, right? Like for years and years and decades, like we were taught that your beard hair is like just an extension of the hair on your head. But until like the last decade, there's been a lot of studies that focus on how the skin, the hair might be similar in like the makeup of of how it's produced, but the skin underneath is much different. So like the best example I can give for that is if you go and take shampoo, like if you take like the Dove shampoo or whatever you use on your head and you start scrubbing your eyebrows and cheeks with it, you're gonna quickly notice like your skin's gonna dry out, it's gonna get irritated, you're gonna run into a lot of problems. So we took that opportunity and we built a brand out of it and created products that were formulated for the skin on your face versus like the skin on your hair or the skin on your head, and just made more sense from a like a sustainable and natural point of view, to kind of again just use it as an opportunity to create cool products that we can kind of put our own interest and takes on, especially like when it comes to the scents and so on. So Royal Beardsman, it began in 2018. Very, very rough start, I will say. Turns out it's really, really hard to convince someone random on the streets. When you think of e-commerce, you have to think in that mindset. It's almost like just walking up to someone on the streets and convincing them to buy a product where you have no reputation, no reviews, you have kind of no sense of social proof or just trust. So it causes you to really dig deep. So the early stages of Royal Greens were rough, and now we're at the point where we're gaining 50,000 plus customers a year, and kind of shooting up from that number. So it was an interesting first couple of years, and we actually learned that the best thing we could do is just get a product out there for free, have people try it, have people leave their feedback and reviews on the site, and build a platform to where it's easy to share that. And then the main focus, of course, on top of that was create the best product we could actually absolutely create. So we were buying from dozens and dozens of different brands and constantly putting ours to the test with all the other options that were out there. So we knew if we could get it in the hands of enough people, that we did the work on the back end to where we hoped our dividends would pay off. So Royal Beardsman, it began growing quickly after we were able to kind of like establish that and build some social proof. And I truly believe the brand, 90% of the brand success is based off of social proof, right? Like people buy our products because their cousin from 2 counties over swears by it and literally is willing to just gift it or share with everyone they can, word of mouth. And that's kind of how we grew our brand that way. So that's Royal Beardsman in a nutshell. And again, we're expanding out. We realize that if we apply the same principles to how we can create a beard product, we can do the same with skincare. So we carry like all natural lotions that are safe and non-greasy for like your face and tattoos, and we create like pomade that kind of does the same thing that a beard balm would do. It allows you to like style your hair without dealing with nasty chemicals and all this crap that you're going to see on the store shelves at like CVS or Walmart. So that's kind of Royal Beardsman in a nutshell. All at Bay is more of a personal brand. So with All at Bay, it's a clothing brand that focuses on like coastal wear, like kind of like the Florida tropical paradise sense of vibes. And like the designs are focused on kind of giving you that constant like vacation mindset. And the reason why the brand was built that way is that's how I've lived my life pretty much since I was a kid. I grew up on a boat. I've owned a couple boats myself. I own a boat now. While always taking a trip out to a sandbar, always taking a trip out to the beach. We're lucky enough to live in Florida to where, there's a dozen beaches and like a 50-mile radius. So it's kind of like a way for me to transition like a lot of my interest and my passion through a brand. So it's a whole different approach to road engagement, right? Like, of course, I make quality clothing the best I can, but on top of that, I'm really trying to sell a lifestyle and not necessarily a product. So it's kind of the opposite of road engagement. That answer your question, Josh? I know it might have been a little bit deeper.
No, that definitely helped out, and I just think it probably helps our audience, right? Obviously, Colby and I are a little more familiar with your businesses, but I think it's good for them because we kind of glance over it a lot of times, and I thought it would be good for them to get a deeper dive into what that is.
Yeah. Check them both out online, allatbay.com, roadbridgeman.com. The sites are kind of stacked up enough to get a good feel of what each brand represents and kind of the audience that builds up the brands as well.
Very cool.
Um,
Colby,
yeah,
I don't want to. Yeah, I was going to say I don't want them all.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was actually curious, Shan, because honestly, so do you have your bachelor's, or did you end up going back to finish school, or did you just like start working and doing the entrepreneurial stuff on the side? Like, what was that all like for you?
Yeah, that's probably the saddest part of my journey. Honestly, I stopped going to school when I was about 4 to 5 classes away from getting my bachelor's in information science
Oh,
and
well.
studies. Yeah. So I ended up applying for my associates. At the time, though, the reason I went with that decision is I actually I landed a position as a systems analyst at a previous organization. So I was shooting for a degree. It was basically an MIS degree I was going for, which would at most hopefully land me like a systems or business analyst position. So it kind of dropped my motivation to finish school a lot, and I've contemplated going back quite a few times. But for me, what drives my motivation, what drives my mindset, is spending like all of my spare time on something that can indirectly or directly improve what I'm going for.
Yep.
So unfortunately, like if I receive, like I'm the type of person where if I receive the outcome before I achieve kind of like the goal at hand, or like the degree for in this situation, it kind of triggers something in my mind to start refocusing on something else. And funny enough, that was 2018 is when, or 2017 is when I began my position as a systems analyst. And 2018 is when I started for Beersman. So it kind of
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that energy that I used towards like finishing my degree and building my career, I used to, okay, I'm kind of in the position that I really like saw myself as being totally happy with for the rest of my life. Where am I like falling short, like elsewhere, like in my personal life? And that's when I decided, okay, what if I could step into kind of like the entrepreneurial mindset and become what I like to call an entrepreneur, which is someone who works a career and then also runs like something else on the side, but also they're not motivated to quit their job, right? Like a lot of people who become entrepreneurs are like, all right, I can't wait to like build this into something where I don't have to work for anyone anymore. Like I don't have to sit at a desk anymore. Like that's generally the mindset for a lot of entrepreneurs. Mine's the opposite, right? Like I can't wait to build a sustainable and automated brand that allows me to really like dive into on my free time without consuming my life. Meanwhile, I'm building the career of my dreams too. So
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, so I guess that leads me to this question then, because I'm curious, like, how did you get to the systems analyst position? Because that's like not like a super easy job to obtain without a specific like degree that like says like, hey, I'm certified in doing XY or something like that, right? And on like part B to that would be, what's it been like to pursue that career portion of what you've been doing? Because I mean, honestly, I think you've been extremely successful in that realm as well while you've been doing the entrepreneurial stuff on the side. And yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, what that trajectory has looked like for you.
Yeah, I think we're all really familiar with this one, and we probably have really similar stories to kind of like how we built our career path. But for me, it was as soon as I've learned that there is nothing but pros to stepping out of your comfort zone when it comes to like a daily job or like a career, and doing the above and beyond without having any expectation or any like mindset towards like getting rewarded for going above and beyond. Like as soon as you can throw that away, I feel like that's a hack to life, or at least at the very least a hack to building a career. So I was able to land that position from a technician uh, job role. So I was literally, um, at the time, I was a computer technician. I saw opportunities to improve some of the software that we had within the organization that other people were, willing to kind of open themselves up to, or at least like grant you the ability to kind of like research it, dig around, see how you can improve it. So my mindset was always like make things the most efficient as I can. And I know I've worked with Josh a lot in my life, and I worked with you too as well, Colby, in the past few years. The same mindset I had while we worked together is the same mindset I've always carried. Like, like do as much as you can without any expectations of a reward. And I know that can be controversial because some people, we all know that office manager or that intern who just goes above and beyond and gets like kind of abused for it, right? But I think often than not, like everyone kind of has what everyone kind of gets what is coming to them as long as they can stay persistent. So I truly believe if you are going above and beyond, and if you're doing, you're providing value that's at a like an easily recognizable state, I think something good is going to come out of it. I'm a big believer in karma too. So even if it isn't directly rewarded, like in your career, you might go home to something positive for it.
That's a
Yeah,
great hack
no, that
for
makes a lot of
life
sense.
contentment too. I mean, being content in life, just doing what you need to do and putting in extra effort where you see it without any real expectation. It just makes you all the more excited and fulfilled when someone does recognize it and reward you for it, which sounds like you had happen across your career.
Yeah, we've had a very, you probably don't know it, Josh, but we had a very similar experience with that. So shout out to Craig Coyle for sure. He's an amazing guy that he ended up being the director at the time while I was a technician, and he was the one that noticed my efforts. He's the one that kind of picked up on the extra responsibilities that I just volunteered myself on, and just decided to take on as opportunities, and he was the reason that uh, those efforts didn't go unnoticed, right? Like even though I didn't expect, and to be honest, I expected him out of everyone to be the last person to recognize it, because I mean he's a director at the time. Craig Coyle was a director of at least like 60 people, right? Like he had a ton of people under his belt. But when you can really kind of again step out of that comfort zone, it's way more recognizable than you may think, especially when the others around you are kind of locked in at just doing what they need to get done. So, and I say that me and you have had probably a similar experiences. I know you've worked with Craig before, and you probably have, the way his personality is, you've probably experienced something really similar. And I know from our coaching sessions that you have that same mindset, right? Like don't ever cut yourself short because the rewards um, aren't lined up for you, right? Like don't ever not commit to going above and beyond at your career or at home or whatever, just because you don't see the direct um, positive outcome out of it, right? Like don't cut yourself short just because of it.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And Craig is awesome. He actually has a podcast out there called Let Me Ask You This. If anyone's interested in learning more about Craig Coyle, um, he was definitely served as a good mentor along the way for sure. And you're right. You know, I was listening to something the other day, a podcast about some actors were on it, and they said, you know, there's an old saying in show business is just take the job because you don't know where it's going to lead or what dividends it may yield down the line. And I think that's a very similar approach to what you're talking about, where you know, do the thing, especially if it brings you any kind of joy or fulfillment, right? And it will be recognized for you going above and beyond. Even if you don't know it's being recognized, somebody is seeing it. Just like somebody's seeing it if you're cutting corners and trying to fly under the belt, right? Somebody's noticing it, whether it's being dealt with at that exact moment or not. They're tucking that information away for when opportunities arise down the line, whether those be for promotion or dismissal, right? I mean, depending on what they're noticing. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's a good way to put it. Like it works both ways for sure. And even if it's just internally you that notices, like when you're
Mhm.
cutting corners or kind of um, giving less care to the things that you do on a daily basis, like just you noticing it alone has a huge impact.
Do you ever feel like with the stuff that you're doing, because it sounds like you're like, you're very much like me where you're very invested in the things that you do, and that so it like really resonates with me. But I'm also amazed at how you're able to do that across like what I would consider like three, like two businesses, and then like how much you take or how much you commit yourself in your career as well. Like that's a lot of yourself in what you're
Yep.
doing. And do you ever find it like hard to balance that with like other like fun things, like just non-work related or personal development related items? Because it's something I struggle with too, where it's like I have a hard time understanding how to get that proper balance in my own life to you know to work hard and to accomplish cool things, but also to have fun while you're doing it. I'm kind of curious, like what has that been like for you, like managing all that?
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons, and there's ups and downs to kind of having a fast-paced lifestyle. Um, for me, it's really never had any detrimental or negative effects for taking on more and more. I mean, it's always sometimes been difficult, and splitting my schedule has been tough. But luckily, I'm reflective enough to know when something isn't really worth my time anymore. Like picking up on, for instance, like we talk about like playing the guitar a lot. Like I will never master the guitar because it will never be a priority of mine above everything else going on in life, right? Like there was a point in time where like I did kind of dream about playing in a band and performing live, but then I shortly learned that that would be fun for me for all of like a week, and it doesn't really pertain like a permanent interest to me. So like the reflection part is important for that, but at the same time, where I do struggle, and I feel like a lot of people in my shoes do as well, is when it's time to kind of pick something new, right? Like venture out. And you talked about having fun, right? Like if I wanted to build a new hobby, I just started playing pickleball, for instance, right? Like everyone else who's like 19 to 35 years old. Yeah, I just started playing pickleball and I love it. But at the same time, I really try to limit myself to my exposure to it because I sometimes have an addictive personality when it comes to like starting a new journey. And I might be, you guys know me well. I might end up buying these like $400 pickleball paddles just to try to get myself motivated enough to become really good. But at the same time, like that is a struggle that I deal with of like picking up something new. But I'm getting better and better at realizing how much effort and kind of resources I should give to that particular thing, right? And I'm
Yeah,
learning that because of experience. Like
yeah,
I
that's
would
such a
definitely
valuable
say,
skill.
yeah. Oh, and it's something that you can only do by doing it, right? Like a lot of people, they get in their own head and they decide not to take on new things because they feel like they have impulse issues,
Hmm.
being able to like control how much time it takes out of their lives. You will never get good at that until you do it. Like I've learned that so hard, because when I was 21 years old and starting, the business and starting a family and all this, like I was all into everything going on at the time. Like I was just completely devoted and I hardly slept. Like I was up till like 3 a.m. every night. I didn't do anything to waste any time. But now, like I've learned that I can't do that for everything I want to take on next. And it's not because I'm getting older. It's just because I'm learning that, I might devote myself to building out, I don't know, like a highly developed brand or like a product line or something like that. But I realized later on that it's something that only piqued my interest for a year, right? I'm getting a lot better at that, which is scary at the same time, because I feel like I'm a little bit less, what would the word be for it? A little bit less kind of, I wouldn't say risk taking, but more, I don't know.
Ambitious.
And yeah, I guess ambitious would be a good word for it, but it's dangerous for me because I have stronger impulse control, which makes it seem like I'm just a little bit less ambitious sometimes. And it can.
I think it's just knowing what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And you don't know what you want until you try things. So the better that you can get at trying things and reading how much you enjoy them, and kind of like reflecting on how long you could enjoy them for too, is super important, right? Like I'll never compete heavily in jujitsu because I'm 30 years old. Like I could do it for what, maybe another 5 to 10 more years before it really gives me like actual like body issues. Like maybe if I was 18 or 22, I'd consider like competing because I love jujitsu that much. But now, yeah, no.
Shan doesn't realize, but he just gave me an excuse not to take it up. Because 5 or 10 years from now, if you can't do it, then I definitely can't do it right now.
I think you can absolutely do it, but if you're trying to compete and become world class,
Gotcha.
I was gonna say you could definitely roll and do jujitsu for well into I mean,
yeah,
I think you can even do it to like your 60s or 70s. Like, I mean, as long as you're like in shape and like you're taking care of your body, and because I think the dangers of it is usually like like not being flexible enough, right? And like so if like you get in these weird positions, you can like hurt yourself, right?
And don't get me wrong, at 30 years old, you can become a world class. You could.
I was
Become
just
a
trying to give
world-class player.
myself an out. That's it,
Yeah,
guys. I was just trying to
No,
give
and that's not
myself
what
an
I'm
out.
trying to.
You don't get it out.
I know you're using it as an excuse, Josh, but that's not what I'm trying to say. For me specifically, I know that I'm not going to drop everything I love doing
Yeah.
to devote all that time to training jujitsu, right? Like that's just not me. But it's important to kind of recognize that too, because I have a lot of friends who are a lot like me and they're very ambitious for a short amount of time, and they lock in a lot harder than I do, but they're a lot less committed and consistent because of that, that lack of impulse control.
Yeah. So that can also
That's
cause you to burn out. You go hard at it for a short period of time. It's kind of like New Year's resolutions, right? Everybody around January really fires it up, and then by February they kind of taper out because they almost went in too hardcore without building up that stamina. It'd be like if I went to jujitsu with you and tried to jump right in, I would almost inevitably get hurt, right? Because I haven't been practicing, I haven't been doing it, I haven't learned the basics, right? So you've built up stamina for it, which allows you to endure through, all the sessions. And I think that's similar when you're taking on a new endeavor. Your stamina that you've built up through all of your business ventures and your career and all of that have allowed you to, become more selective, but also allow you to keep up the pace on the things that matter most. And I think that's really admirable and something to take away for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's a good analogy to use, right? Like you can't just jump in and just because you perform the same or you're doing the same task that the high performers are doing, it doesn't mean that you're going to build this overnight stamina and be able to do it again for the next 5 days in a row, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
100%.
No, I think it's been a great combo, Shan. I appreciate you opening up to us and sharing a bit about yourself and your businesses there. About that time to wrap things up with final thoughts, and I'll kick things off this week from my perspective. I loved the fact about talking about, the maturity leading to the selectiveness. Everyone's got only so much time in the day, and if it's not going to be something that you're really going to commit to for long term, I think it's awesome that you can reflect and kind of prioritize what's most important. Not that you don't sprinkle some things in, like pick up pickleball and do some new things, but to your point, you're not going to go spend 20 hours a week on pickleball because it's more of that enjoyable hobby rather than you going pro. And I think it's just a neat distinction to be able to make, and I think that does come partially from experience, partially from reflection, and just um, that self-awareness around what's most important to you. So that's my key takeaway from everything you shared with us today, Shannon. I appreciate it. Colby, how about you, sir? Any final thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think for me, probably the thing that just stuck out the most is just in relationship to how Shan thinks about utilizing his free time, not in the sense that not in the maybe the exact way he was talking about, but just like specifically when he was talking about almost like not taking it too seriously, or at least not approaching it like you need to have everything figured out before you like, make it a bigger deal in your life, right? Like it's almost like approaching it in a more playful manner where you're just like you're trying things out, you're just like seeing where things go, you're trying to create something of any kind, and then depending on what happens with it at those initial stages, you can grow it or you can toss it to the side depending on how well or how poorly it was going. And I think for me personally, it just resonates a lot because even if I'm not starting my own business, I think that mindset is very um wise for anything that you're trying to pick up or do in your side time that is growth related, or kind of like anything like new in your life that you're doing. I think even if it's like just a little hobby that you're doing, because like even for me on the side with programming and coding, right? Like I picked it up because it was like a initial skill that I just kind of wanted to develop to help me out in my career, and it's starting to grow more and more into something that like I really want to pursue, um, and like get really good at and do like fun and interesting things with. And it's easy to pressure yourself into thinking that you got to have everything figured out or sorted out in your head at the start, or even like partially through the beginning of your journey. But at the end of the day, you still got to like take it one step at a time, and like there will be a proper time to actually expand it further into like a business or into like a larger thing in your life. So it just really resonated with me. It's definitely something I'm going to be keeping in mind.
No, 100%. And Shan, anything you want to wrap up with here, man? It's all you. It's your day.
No, I love Colby's reflection kind of on today's episode because I feel like, I mean, it's majority of people think in a similar manner, right? Like we romanticize and we focus on the success of like someone's life, but we don't even think about like what it took to get there, and all the times where it didn't look so pretty. And honestly, like the best, we didn't even talk about this, and maybe I should have brought it up before, but like I've tried the venture in several other things. I mean, just a year ago, I tried to get my dealer's license to be able to buy and flip motorcycles, right? Like as a car dealer. 2 years ago, I started my real estate, like like I tried to study and get my real estate license. There's a time where I tried to start a social media marketing company. And man, one other, I know there's at least one other thing out there. I mean, even when we talked about Amazon FBA, right? Like that was something that I devoted a crap ton of my time for almost like a year straight in doing, and had a separate LLC registered for it and everything. But just because I'm not doing any of those things, like that, that a lot of people again will just focus on like Olive Bay or Beardsmith, where those are just the ones that stuck because I found something in them. Exactly what Colby said. Like a lot of people, they work in reverse. They worry about um, like kind of starting with an investment amount, or like taking on more than they should, whether the versus just kind of like starting. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's a lot of times where people won't show that side of things, especially like online when you're following a lot of like motivational entrepreneurs and stuff. Like a lot of them, they'll openly tell you about how they ventured into these different things and either failed or just decided not to continue them. But you're not going to focus on it. You're going to forget about that. You're always going to it's always going to lock in the back of your mind like what's really working out for them, and it gets in your head. You start to think like, oh man, like I guess I'm just not built for it. But in reality, it's all about just jumping in, trying it out, and if it's something that sticks, just double down on it.
Yep.
For sure. And speaking of jumping in, if you've been thinking about commenting on these or sharing it with your friends, sounds like don't overthink it. If that's anything that you take away from today, just jump in and get it done. And be sure to let everyone know about Mastermind for the Masses so they can learn more about how to improve their personal and professional goals, as well as learn more about Shan on this week's episode. So, appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will see you next time on Mastermind for the Masses.